Hello and welcome to episode 3, where I'm looking back at the official ratings from the back end of last season, and in this episode I'll be looking at the novice hurdlers. So the list and the number that I normally look at for these horses is 150 plus, and then we'll scrape through a few from a little bit lower down in the ratings than that, ones that I think might not have fully shown their potential over novice hurdling, and those that are just of interest really in general. Now you'll notice there's lots of 150 horses with novice hurdlers. We've got a few second season novices that do go over hurdles, but the way you have to really understand this is that horses will run in bumpers. Some of them will go straight over hurdles, but they're going to be established hurdlers, which is where they're going to make their big ratings, or when they go novice chasing, their marks will go up, and then obviously when they go into real competitive chases in open company, that's when their marks will get really high. So although we've got 150 horses in here, it doesn't mean we've got a bad batch of novice hurdlers. And the reason I've extended the list a bit here is to capture, you can see the 3 horses under the 150. We'll start off with Emitom. So I think this horse is a really, really nice prospect. I don't think we've seen anywhere near the best of him yet. I think all through the season he looked nice and progressive. He's got decent bumper form. He's got decent hurdle form. He was runner-up in the Sefton at Aintree in his first try over 3 miles. That race at Newbury where he beat Interconnected, now that was the big horse that lots of people took out of it. He's going to be a fantastic horse in his own right. But Emitom was under a double penalty that day, giving him £10. So that was a real decent effort from him. Where they go with him this season, I wouldn't be 100% sure, because I think he does look like a chaser in the making. But I think for the time being, I don't think he's achieved what he could, like completely over hurdles yet. He is rated 147, so he's got quite a bit of find to, match with something like Paisley Park, if we're talking about this as a stayers hurdle horse, which I think he could be. But Paisley Park started last season on 140, so it's not inconceivable. He's got options where he might go. I think Cole Harden a few years back, Warren Greatorex went for a slightly different route with him, but there's the handicap at Haydock that Paisley Park won last year. That would seem to make sense. So there's options with him in there. 147 is, I think, underrating this horse. So I would be not surprised, but I'd like to think they might take in a handicap with him at the beginning of the season. But yeah, he's a really nice progressive type, and I would like to see him stay over hurdles for one more season before he goes over fences. He is only 5 going 6, so let him have a bash at the stayers hurdle, I think, would be a sensible option. Brewing Up a Storm, so one of many horses for Ollie Murphy that will be in this episode. He won it's an Easter bumper an Easter point-to-point race where lots of horses of big names have gone and won in that particular race. They've all been sold for reasonable money, and they've gone on and they've all been competitive in graded races. Now he was really, really good in his bumper debut when he smashed up Portrush Ted, who obviously went on and won at Aintree. He wasn't so good after that at Newbury, and then it was the same sort of feel this season. So he was really good at Huntingdon. Ollie Murphy said that day that he would need the run. I was put off backing him that early in the season, even though I thought the price was massive. And then while you'd have expected him to take him that big step forward, he hasn't shown his full ability since then. But you have to consider he's gone into a Grade 1, where he's run fairly close behind Champ, and that was a really close blanket finish. Birchdale at Cheltenham, lots of people will say that he would have won that day. I'm not sure, but he would have been there or thereabouts, and that's in a Grade 2. And then after that, he's come 4th in a Grade 1 at Cheltenham in the Ballymore, and then he's gone to Aintree and he's come 2nd behind Reserve Tank there. So you look at the competition that he's been running up against, bar getting another victory to his name, he's actually run really, really well. And the interesting thing with this horse is he always looked, being an ex-pointer, that he's going to be like a 3-miler, or the middle trips would suit him out. But he has got a lot of pace, so it's really good to see Ollie Murphy's going to start him over 2 miles chasing this season with the option to step him up later. Obviously, Ollie Murphy's got Thomas Darby that we're all looking at as potentially an Arkle horse, but I think Brewing Up a Storm could make into that as well. We'll just have to see how his season goes, but he's one that, I'm really excited to see go over fences, and he's another one like Emitom that I think we're miles away from seeing the best of what his horse can offer. Now, Bright Forecast. He's for Ben Paulin. He is going novice chasing this season. He's a horse I'm quite excited about. Now, obviously, officially, he's rated higher than Brewing Up a Storm and Emitom, and the stuff that I've shown you there with Brewing Up a Storm, all that graded placed form, may possibly read a little bit better. But you look at Bright Forecast, when he got beat at Haydock by Mr. Fisher, he was beaten by a horse that was then touted for a Supreme. I don't necessarily think Haydock particularly suited him. He ran a really good race to come 3rd in the Ballymore. There's loads more to come from this horse as well, so I can't wait to see him go over fences. it's just an option of where they're going to go with them. So I would suggest that he's probably more of like a JLT type, although I would quite like to see him go up and maybe test an RSA. But we'll have to see how he progresses this season, see how he gets on. But he is a talent that is well worth watching. Now, Itchy Feet, his long-term future will be over fences, but Ollie Murphy's mentioned that he's considering, I think he might have mentioned the Welsh National. He's looking at maybe some hurdle races for him at the beginning of the season, see how he gets on in those types of races. And then they'll decide whether they're going to have a campaign towards a champion hurdle or whether they will go over fences. I mean, a couple of his victories, I was at Kempton when he beat Gransonsi. It was a small field, a 4-runner race. None of them wanted to go. They led at a crawl, and I'm not saying he was fortunate to win that, but that was a Class 1 listed hurdle, and things could have gone different on a different day. Obviously, his race at Cheltenham after that, when he was conceding the £5 penalty to Elixir de Nuts, looks like rock-solid form now. He was third in a Supreme, which is decent. And although he was probably over the top at Aintree, he still ran pretty well behind Felix de Gis. So Itchy Feet's a really interesting and nice type. I think with the hurdle and chase prospect with him, they're probably looking at the fact that Thomas Darby and Brewing Up a Storm are going to start off around about 2 miles chasing. You'd like to think one of those two is going to shape into an Arkle type, so they're probably thinking, let's keep Itchy Feet over hurdles for another season, and then he could be an Arkle prospect for the season after. But we'll have to see how he goes. He's a lovely type, and he actually ran really well last season in the main. I just don't know how much better he might turn out to be. I mean, he's obviously going to improve for a fence, but I don't know how much more he will. But lovely type anyway. And within these novices here in the novice hurdlers, the only mare that we've got in here is Honeysuckle. Now, she was the one that at Cheltenham, there's a lot of talk about the mare's novice hurdle. It was basically, you're either in the Honeysuckle camp or you're in the Nicky Henderson, JP, or should have revised for this, shouldn't I? What was her name? It'll come to me in a minute, but obviously the one that flopped at Cheltenham anyway. But she missed Cheltenham, had a bit of a setback, and then we saw what she went and did at Fairy House. She's 150 rated for a novice mare. So if you shove on her £7 mare's allowance, she's the second highest rated novice hurdler from last season. And I don't think that's astounding in terms of I don't think she's good enough for that. I just think it's really, really impressive that she was that good. And she may have gone under the radar slightly following the fact that she missed the festival, but she's going to be a really fantastic competitor for this season. Where they go for her in terms of distance, I'm not sure. Whether they send her over fences or not, I'm not sure. But you'd like to think that she's probably big enough to jump a fence, and she's a winning point-to-pointer. That's probably where she's going to shine. The mark that she's on at the moment, if she's going to go for something like, we're looking at maybe a middle trip and we're talking about a JLT prospect, like Shattered Love did a few seasons ago, she hasn't really got a lot to find considering the only novice that's rated higher than her, Classical Dream's going to be going champion hurdle, and the ones that are in and around her, Getaway Trunk's probably going Arkle, she's a genuine contender for those sorts of races, so it'd be great to see her back out on the course. I would say this far out, I'd be thinking she's got to go over fences and we're thinking about the JLT, but that's obviously up to them, and I haven't heard anything from the camp. So Thomas Darby, the one of Ollie Murphy's I touched on slightly, he is just absolutely built for Cheltenham Racecourse. Now, I've seen him a couple of times race. We were there when he had his seasonal debut at Cheltenham. He drifted quite a bit that day. That sort of confidence makes you think maybe he was going to come on for the run. There was no comment that I heard about that, but it was the same with Brewing Up a Storm. Ollie Murphy obviously can get one ready, despite what he says. Now, he beat Elixir de Nuts that day. We know what Elixir de Nuts has gone on and done. I just thought that was a really, really good performance. He was slightly unlucky at Ascot. He could have won that. It was a head bobber. Kempton, things just didn't seem to go right for him, and I don't know. That just didn't seem like him at Kempton, and I think that was a flatter, speedier track, which probably wouldn't have suited him. Obviously, he was going to go and win at Taunton the price that he was, but then come second in the Supreme. That's solid form because Classical Dream is an absolute beast. This lad going over fences is going to be fantastic to see. Yeah, and I'm really excited about him as well. We'll have to see how he gets on because obviously he'd have the option to revert back over hurdles if things weren't going to plan, and that's where the Itchy Feet thing might come into it. But yeah, Thomas Darby's really exciting for this season. And now we're on to the first one of the video replays that we've got. So Reserve Tank. He's a horse that I had marked down at Chepstow as one that definitely needed to be paid attention to. It wasn't. There's a couple in here. So we've got Benny's Bridge that's coming in second, and you'll see the finish wasn't really ridden out. That's why I was keen for him in the handicap. And you'll see Reserve Tank was being ridden, but look at that effort from Benny's Bridge in second. He could have got closer, couldn't he? Never mind. We got him in the handicap. So yeah, Reserve Tank. I was keen to see him run at Chepstow. He just looked like a really interesting recruit. He'd had a run there and he'd had another run in between. Now, this was the race at Sandown where he actually got his head in front with Elusive Bells on the far side. I think Sam Wadey-Cohen messed up a bit there, sat on there for a bit too long, could have actually got the race won. The frustrating thing for me in this position was I was looking at this horse as a decent horse, and I just thought, you know what, get through here, get beat. You've got a nice handicap mark in the 130s, and then you can go yourself for a nice handicap. But obviously he goes and wins at Sandown here. That gives him his mark and then puts him into the territory where Tizard's thinking, do you know what, we actually have got a really nice horse. But that progression from his early races was really visible, and lots of Tizard's horses, especially the novice hurdlers, they improve so much for when they start racing and when they sort of move on a bit after that. So here we can see Reserve Tank running at Kempton. He's second going into this last flight here, and you can see how he picks up nicely from the back end of that flight. He looks like a horse that wants that little bit of extra trip, but obviously he has got that bit of speed as well, so you'd have to suggest that his long-term target for the season is going to be a JLT, I'd have thought. And this is him at Aintree, absolutely hacking up, and there's some good horses up in behind. This is a really assured performance from him, and as I say, you can visibly see how he's progressed through the season. So, of course, he's a really, really nice type. The best thing that he did for the whole season, in terms of validating how much he has progressed, is what he did at Punchestown. So I think that was a really, really good performance. We've got some solid horses in behind here. There's even City Island in the mix there. City Island was the only one that didn't, of the three novices, that didn't do the hurdles and Punchestown double. But Reserve Tank here, look how well he's travelling. And we saw in that last race, not the last race at Aintree, the race before that at Kempton, where he wasn't necessarily travelling going into that back, but you can see how much of a better horse he is from here, even from a couple of starts prior. Picks up nicely as we would be expecting him to do, and I think this is a really, really good effort. Now, he's not going to go missing from many people's sort of follow list. Loads of people are going to be talking about this horse, and rightly so. He looks like a serious prospect. Cannot wait to see him go over fences. That's when he's going to thrive. Be great to see him at Chepstow in a couple of weeks or a few weeks. We'll just have to see where he goes. But JLT this far out will be my sort of figure of where he's probably likely to be headed. We've got Al Dancer in at the same sort of mark. Well, exactly the same mark. Now, I never get on the bandwagon with some of these horses. He won well in a handicap at Cheltenham. He obviously went and won the rearranged Betfair hurdle, but he was trash in the Supreme, in all fairness to him. And they were talking about him settling and all those sorts of things about him, but, you know, we saw what Classical Dream did before the Supreme, and he went and hacked up. So, you know, it has to be a disappointing performance from him. Like to see him go over fences, probably, see if that might calm him down a little bit. But yeah, he's a nice horse. I wouldn't be expecting him to be going to the top of the hurdle ranks if he stays over that, or in novice chasers. Grand Sancy, so where I mentioned that within these novice hurdlers, lots of them are starting out at that point. Grand Sancy was actually a second season novice, so he'd run in the Fred Winter, Sam Twiston Davis minded him there. He'd run in races before, he ran in the Adonis. You can see at the bottom here, he'd had 4 hurdle starts the season prior. So he was allowed for me to be at the forefront of the novice hurdles to begin in the season, but when it comes to the springtime, it's when you get found out, because you've got all that extra experience. But he'll be going over fences. He's a nice type. I think he travels pretty well, so he's exciting to see. And of course, he's only 5. Nicholls' horses do thrive when they go over fences. That's what his game's all about. Now, we've got the first juvenile we're going to take a look at here is Fusil Raffles. So Munir and Swede have some decent juveniles all the time. They've got loads of prospects that they're bringing through. Ajali was one that I was latched onto very early in the season, but when this lad came along after Ajali had slightly disappointed, his performance in the Adonis is up there with one of the best I've seen in recent years, to be honest. Now, I think it was an overreach injury he got where he suffered the cut on his leg, but you can see how well he's travelled into that particular flight. This is a couple out. He's gone through the top of that, so that might be where he's caught a bit of the injury, but he's riding on here, and we have to remember at some point he's got a cut and he's carried on. Now, it won't have affected him enough to mean that he's not going to show his true performance, but obviously it's not ideal to get any sort of niggle in a race. Look how he quickens clear from the last. Let's be honest, if he'd have gone and run in the Triumph hurdle, given the way that things panned out there, you'd have been disappointed if he wouldn't have been competitive in that. Not saying he would have beaten Penton Hills, because you don't know, but it was a very, very assured performance. And then he missed, obviously, Cheltenham, but then to go run at Punchestown in the festival, I was really impressed with this performance. He's travelled well again, you can see that, and lots of these juvenile hurdlers do travel well. They'll run well over 2 miles, and then next season the aim's got to be going maybe a little bit further in trip. But I reckon this horse has got enough speed that they could keep him at 2 miles. I'll be interested to see what they do with him. I'd like to think they're going to go down the line of champion hurdle with him for this season, and then he could potentially be an Arkle prospect the season after that. I don't want him to rush this horse, but he's obviously got plenty of speed about him. He travels really well in his races, so he is one that's very exciting for next season. And lots of the juveniles do get sort of on the radar for the following season, but most of them don't really follow through with it. I would be disappointed if Fusey Raffles wasn't a better horse next season than we've seen this season. Now, Champ obviously went and got that decent win at Aintree. That was in the Sefton when he stepped up to 3 miles. They had the option really with this horse of going over fences this season, but the first clip we'll pick up here is he's running against Vindication here. This is the season before last, so this is how close he was to losing his novice hurdle status. So again, when I touched on these second season novice hurdlers, Champ had only had this particular race, I think, but it wasn't like he was fully wound up, but he is more forward than other novice hurdlers that season. So he was only sort of a neck away from being a non-novice this season, but gets away with it. This is where he does go and win a race. He's stupidly short odds on here. And he was a horse that was talked about quite a lot in his early days as well. He just took a long time to get there and get out. And he's taken his racing really well this season to get all the way through to Aintree and put in that performance that he did. So I wouldn't be worried about him being fragile or anything like that now. This is him at the beginning at Newbury, where he's in the handicap, and you can see that he's pulling the arms off there. And you can't get a horse, you can't leave a horse when they're doing this. I touched on this in the previous episode when we were talking about Kenboy. If a horse is putting up this, you've just got to let them go. It's just a pointless exercise. But in a 2.5 mile handicap, when you're carrying a reasonable weight, you don't really want to be kicking on. We know how long the running is at Newbury, and it was actually before the turn. It was down the end of the back straight where he pulled himself into the front and let him go. But you can just see that he's in front. He's every right to tire now, and we know he stays 3 miles, but because of the fact he would have expended that energy from pulling, but he draws away from this field. He's got them well strung out in a handicap. This was a serious performance. I can't remember exactly the mark that he won this race off, but it wasn't a trash mark. He was fairly well rated at that point, so that put him right up there as one of the top novice hurdlers at that point. Then we have the race at Newbury with Getaway Trump in there, Cateson, and we've got Brewing Up a Storm back in behind. Now, Getaway Trump travelled just as well for me as Champ did going into that there. I wonder whether Harry Cobden could have sent Getaway Trump on a bit sooner, but I don't think it maybe would have made a difference to the result. But this is a decent effort. The form's been franked after. Horses in and behind have run really well after. So that was a really assured performance. Now, this is him in the Ballymore. I get frustrated when horses are on the right-hand side facing forward, so the left, as we can see it here for Champ, as they turn in. I think you're much better to be on the inside. You've got the option then to lean into a horse or whatever, but you can see here, Champ, when they go into the last, he shies a little bit there, I think, when it looks like City Island comes across him a bit. He seems to slow up. He shied a little bit there. It's just those sort of positional things. I'm not saying he would have beaten City Island, but he could have got a lot closer, I think. And it's a decent effort. He's come runner-up in the Ballymore. Then he steps up to 3 miles here at Aintree, and just look how well he's travelling in here. Now, Emma Tom's to the left of him, made a sloppy mistake there, but Emma Tom was travelling okay-ish to that point. It's here when Champ starts riding on him, and this is the question marks coming out. Is he really going to stay? What's he going to do? Is he going to pull away? And you can see the front two. They're drawing clear of everything else in this race, so they're both stayers for sure. That's why I touched on with Emma Tom that maybe he could have got a bit closer to him, but that's a cracking effort. He's done that over 3 miles, so it was all about chasing with this horse, I think, in the first instance. He's had a really, really good novice hurdle season. He was probably allowed to be that good because of the fact that he was a second season novice technically, but can't wait to see him go over fences. You'd have to think RSA would be the long-term aim with him. Hopefully we'll see him at Kempton in the Calto Star Novices Chase, but there's plenty of races to be run at Newbury as well, so that's probably where we'll see him go for the season. Now, Manila Indo. This is one that was frustrating for me in the fact that I do quite well in the Albert Bartlett. The Friday when I did my write-ups, we did them quite quickly in there, but if anyone watched the video that I did going through this market, I liked Allaho for the race, but I did say that Manila Indo did all the donkey work at Clonmel, and the fact that Allaho was sort of 10 times the price shorter than Manila Indo going into Cheltenham, 50 to 1 was absurd for the Albert Bartlett. It's not a 50 shot. So this is at the beginning of the season where they've let him go round and they've tried to get him to travel in there. He's running against reasonable types in here. It's very early in the season for him, and obviously you can see as the season's gone on that he's progressed, but He travelled okay to a point there. This would look to me as a horse that, not that he's a non-stayer, but he's probably just doesn't have as much pace as some other horses. And this looked like a race where he was blowing away the cobwebs, definitely needed the run. You get lots of these horses that will blow up towards the end of their races early in the season, and that's probably a fitness thing more than anything else. The race that we'll see after that is his first try at 3 miles, and this is where he's gone against Allaho, and he's gone on and made the work here. So in this particular race where I think he's done a lot of the donkey work, he has been forced to go out in front, and you can see that he's not going as well as everything else in there. So again, entitled to improve from this run, but having to go out in front and force the pace isn't ideal. You don't really want to be setting your own fractions if you can help it. Some horses like being out at the front, but in these long races, you're much better to be settled in at the back and then coming on. So Allaho got the run of the race here. It was a good performance from Allaho from the last, quick and clear. But when you consider the price differential between these two and the Albert Bartlett, Milena Indo was 50 to 1. Allaho was, 5 to 1 maybe, even as short as that. And I did fancy Allaho to run at the festival. We can see Milena Indo here in third on the inside, so he's getting a lead, so he's not having to force the run. He does like to be prominent. But I fancied Allaho in this. Rhinestone was putting his My Lively outside. Rhinestone was kicking off in the prelims. Obviously, I couldn't get that message to you guys. Don't get enough signal at the racecourse to update. But I did back Manila Indo at a big price. I'm just gutted I didn't put it up for you guys. But you can see here, now that he's had a toe into the race, he's not stopping. He is staying on. And those earlier races where he looked like he might have been paddling late on, I think that just goes to show that it might have been a bit of a fitness thing. He was obviously trained to peak in the spring, which why wouldn't you do that? And he's getting challenged here, and you'd think that he could be taken over. But, it's a really decent performance from him. And although it was a 50 to 1 shot on paper, he wasn't a 50 to 1 shot in the first place. He could have maybe been a 10, 12, 14 shot. But he went and franked the form by winning at Punchestown as well. So I touched on earlier, he did the double. You can see Allaho was made more use of there to see if they could run the sting out of Milena Indo, probably. We've got carefully selected in third. He was making a couple of his second start back, and I think he's a really, really nice type. So I think the form will stack up from this. I think it'll read well going into next season. There's every reason to think Milena Indo could go to the top over fences because you can see that he's a decent size of a horse. Be very similar, I think, this season, that he might be a little bit of a slow burner until he gets to the festival. But yeah, RSA's got to be the option with this horse, and I think this far out, you'd have to say he's got a big chance. We'll move on to Felix de Gie. It's a horse that I really like, although it's going to be one that throughout his career, I think you're going to have to just catch him on the good day, and I think he needs tactics to go his way. I touched on the fact that he's probably better when he can go out in front and do his own things, which was shown at Aintree when he won really well. Fifth in the Supreme, not getting things his own way up front. He actually was settled in the middle of the pack, really does read as a decent form. And then obviously he just got stuffed by Classical Dream at Punchestown. So you'd expect that Felix de Gie, being 6 going on 7, will go over fences this season, and that sort of form would make him probably an Arkle kind of type. But it is the fact that he needs to get things his own way worries me about him. But really nice horse all the same. City Island, probably thinking of Ballymore winner. Why haven't I chucked him in the video? Well, we've seen him in the Ballymore in the Champ clips. We've seen him at Punchestown in the Reserve Tank clips. He obviously is a really nice type. He had an easy-ish start to his season, given the fact that he could run in an auction race at Naas and Leopardstown. It's not a bad maiden hurdle to go in there, but I don't think he's been up against real worldies. I think at Cheltenham, he's won the Ballymore and he won it on merit. He deserved to win that race. Like I said, I do think maybe Barry could have got a bit closer if he'd have been a bit smart with the ride. But all of that taken to one side. It was Derek O'Connor that rode him at Punchestown. Maybe that could be used as an excuse, although Derek's a very assured jockey. Mostly rides in, the point things. He's good over fences and does well in the bumpers as well. But it was that sort of performance you just think there that, I don't think he was over the top in the slightest, but it was a February, a March and a May run. 3 runs within close succession. You could probably, if you're a fan of his, you'd have to draw a line through that going into next season. But I'd like to see him go over fences. I do think he could probably show enough speed to go back to 2 miles and maybe be in the champion hurdlist short of picture, but I think they're going to go over fences with this horse this season, and it'll be interesting to see how he gets on. Now, Pentland Hills, not saying it's ridiculous, but it is brilliant that we've got the top 3 rated horses, so Elixir's and its Pentland are the same, so we'll say Pentland's in the top 3. 2 of the top 3 novice hurdlers from last season are from the owners group, and I know plenty of you are involved in this horse and in with Getaway Trump as well. Now, the great thing to see with this is, I think this was Plumpton. just showing you the clip here, just seeing how far strung out the horses are in behind. And I will say this over and over again in these episodes that I'll do. With horses that are wide margin winners, especially out on debut, I don't care who the competition are in behind, horses that travel this well, that pick up this easily and draw away from any type of field, is a horse of tremendous ability. Now, we know Penton was nowhere near the levels of Sir Eric on the flat, but he loves to jump in, and he does look like he's got plenty of stamina about him. And that's the sort of thing with these juveniles, as I touched on before, they tend to stay after. And we can see here in the Triumph that he's travelling the best of anything in here. Cœur Sublime on the inside is travelling well as well. It was a bit of an up-and-down horse throughout the season, but you can see I think Penton Hills is the last one that comes off the bridle. Cœur Sublime's being ridden here. Penton Hills is still being held together. It's a cracking effort for a horse that's only had one start over hurdles. Obviously, he's had that flat bit in behind, so he knows he's racing. He's been trained and he's been fit beforehand. But it's a really, really decent effort in the Triumph. I know what happened with Sir Eric will mar the race, but you can't take anything away from Penton Hills. This is a really, really impressive Triumph hurdle victory, and it was fantastic for the owners group and anyone that was involved. Now, at Aintree, I'll be honest, I was worrying slightly whether he'd be good enough to go and do it again. I thought, it's a Triumph. He's had the Novice hurdle before, which didn't take much out of him, but I just thought this is really the acid test. And you can see him here again, last off the bridle, absolutely cruising. Nico seems to get on with him really well. I don't think he knew too much about him before that Cheltenham Festival victory, but he does know a lot more about him now. And the fact that he travels so well, and when you ask him, he picks up, he's a really, really nice prospect for this season. I have got the Nicky Henderson book coming through to tell me where they talk about their horses in training. I suspect Penton Hills has got to be going for a champion hurdle. You wouldn't want to be sticking a flatbread really over fences. So he's a really exciting prospect, and anyone that's involved in him has done really, really well. Now, Elixir de Nuts missed the festival, disappointed plenty in the fact that he didn't run, but I mean, if we're being brutally honest, there's no way he would have beaten Classical Supreme in the Supreme. Sorry, Classical Dream in the Supreme. Now, another one that's a second season novice. He ran over hurdles as a juvenile. He flopped completely behind Apple Shakira, and then he fell at Utoxeter, which I think I might have a clip in here. We do. So he fell at Utoxeter, and this is another thing. Not saying that he would have won this race. He's on the left-hand side. He's there or thereabouts. I reckon he wouldn't have been far off winning this race, which meant he wouldn't have been a novice going into last season. So, like we had with Champ, where he was close to being there, and like I said, I'm not saying he definitely would have won this, but you have to remember these horses that are going into a hurdling season as a second season novice are more forward than the others, so they're allowed to be maybe a bit better at the beginning of the season. So this was him at Cheltenham the day that Thomas Darby ends up winning. He's done all the donkey work from the front, and I do think I like 3 mile horses that show enough speed at 2 miles, and not saying that they could have done would have done much different with this horse, but I do think that Elixir de Nuts looks like he's a horse that's going to stay further. So we'll have to see how that transpires through this season. This is a really decent effort, regardless of the fact that he doesn't manage to stay on and win the race. This is the race that I was talking about where he goes and beats Itchy Feet, and although he's getting the £5 from him, he's gone out in front again. Harry Cobden's sort of getting a real good feel from this horse. And considering what he was like as a juvenile, he moved from Philip Hobbs to Colin Tizard. Since he's gone to Tizard, he's progressive. And as I say with the Tizard horses, especially the novice hurdlers, they progress so much through a season, it's unreal. So to do this early in the season, there's some nice types in behind as well. This was a really, really good effort. And this was the start of showing us that, do you know what, actually, this Elixir de Nuts looks above average. Then we've got Jarvis Plate in behind. This is a race where he was giving loads of weight away. It's a really, really decent effort from him. I think this race, there was a Nicky Henderson horse, and I can't remember off the top of my head what it was that was a non-runner late in the day on this, but I was at Cheltenham to see this, and this is another effort from Elixir de Nuts. You just look at him and just realise that he is a proper horse, and he loves it round Cheltenham. So where I was mentioning about the stamina thing might be apparent about him later on down the line. You can see here he's not short speed, and he just loves it round Cheltenham. Now, this is Sandworth in the Tolworth hurdle. Lots of horses that do well in the Tolworth end up going on to the Ballymore or tend to be stayers later on. So that's another pointing thing for there. But this was a really, really decent effort. I think Southfield Stone, the Nichols horse in the Pink Silks, is going to be really good over fences. I actually do think he was probably slightly underrated over hurdles. But this is a proper effort from Elixir de Nuts. Harry Cobden makes use of him all the time. Good jump there at the last, and you can just see the attitude within him. He doesn't want to go down. I know that race we got beaten by Thomas Darby, but he wouldn't relinquish second place there. And as I touched on with the Tizard horses, they progress as the season goes on. So it was a shame he missed the festival, but he looks a he looks a really, really nice horse. I think they're going to be aiming down the line of a champion hurdle with him this season, and you do need a bit of stamina to be able to compete in a champion hurdle. I do think he's got speed. It'd be really interesting to see how he gets on this season, but at this point I wouldn't have him pinned as a champion hurdle horse. Like I say, he's a nice type. It'd be really good to see him. He'll pick up some races, but I can't see him winning a champion hurdle, so I'll stick my neck out this early on. I do think at some point, though, he will end up being a stayer, I think. Now, Getaway Trump, the other one in the owners group, if you just take a look at the Racing Post comments that we've got at the bottom here, or the snippet from there, he's had 2, 4, 6, 8 runs last season. So that's a tremendous amount of racing for a novice hurdler. I think the fact is they were planning on just going and winning some novice hurdles at the beginning of the season. They didn't really appreciate how good a horse he was until he ran in the race at Newbury, in the Challow hurdle. And then after that, they've had to pitch him in the right sort of company. So I think he would have won the Betfair hurdle that was at Ascot if it was run at Newbury. But it's just really interesting to see how good this horse has progressed through the season. So he does not necessarily runs in snatches, but I do think there's bits and pieces about him where we watch him race and you just think, oh, maybe he's not travelling that well. Sometimes he looks like he might need soft, sometimes he looks like he might need further. But all of a sudden, Harry Cobden's managed to get him back on the bridle sort of here. You can see Harry Cobden's looking up thinking, Jesus, I've actually got a hell of a lot more horse here than I thought. So he might be a type of horse that I think you need to tell him to go. I think you need to tell him how to be ridden in a race. Some horses can pull themselves and they'll show you what they need to be done. But you see how far clear they pulled away from the third in this particular clip. Just think Getaway Trump is a really, really nice horse. Now, this race at Exeter, I can't remember all of the names in here. I think Tidal Flow's in there. There are lots of nice types within this particular race. This was classed as soft ground, I think, or might have even been classed as heavy. But you watch the way that he travels through this and the way that he goes on and wins. This isn't a trash novice hurdle. This is some really, really good novice hurdle form. And it was the start of showing that this looks like Getaway Trump might need this ground and potentially might need a little bit further as time goes on. But at Newbury, they went a crawl. We all knew that. It turned into a bit of a sprint. You can see Harry Cobden on the left here. Getaway Trump is travelling as well as anything else. Champ's being ridden a little bit for position, but that's only it's for position. He's not coming off the bridle, really. But this is where I just wish that Harry Cobden had sent him on, because I think that sometimes Getaway Trump takes a little bit of time to respond for that. But, you know, Harry's one of the best jockeys in the game, so he knows better than I do by far. He ran really, really well here. It was a bit of a reachy jump at the last, but he's got himself over quite nicely. And you can see here, once Harry does ask him, he does start to pick up a bit after. So that's just where I thought maybe he could have gone on a bit sooner. But let's not begrudge this. He's come second in a really, really decent novice hurdle against a really decent novice hurdler. Now here at Ascot, you can see the early clips. You can see he's hung out sort of the middle-ish of the field, much further towards the back. And that, as soon as that happened at the start of the race, that annoyed me, really. It frustrated me because he needs to be up with the pace. You can see here, there he was middleish, and you can see that he's slowly dropping back now. You can see Harry Cobden, there was a horse short of him, but you can see his black cap at the back. So he's dropped right out to the back of the field. He's starting to travel through to come in with it now, but the first few that placed in this race were all up with the running. We could see Al Dancer was there from the beginning. I can't remember the names of the second and the third, but they're all in and around it from being up at the front. And Harry Cobden just gave him too much to do. So I think if he could add that ride back, he would have done something different. He might have put him up there a bit earlier. So in all credit to the horse, he is staying on after he's been ridden, but it was all too little too late. If that was at Newbury, before we had the old flu situation that's going on, then I think he probably would have won the race. And I do think if Harry Cobden had tactically put him closer up, he would have won this race as well. But he's been well beaten in the end, so maybe that's me just being a bit overzealous with him. He then goes and I think I don't know this for certain. I'm sure he was close to the course record at Ayr. He ran stupidly quick at Ayr, and this came on quick ground. That was where I was touching on the fact that we thought he probably does need a bit of give in there, but you can see the way he's going through this again. Travelled nicely. Harry Cobden's asking him, and he does pick up. It's a very good performance again, and I think he was, entitled to win that particular race. And really, when you take into the fact that he's got Grade 2 placed form, and then we see here at Sandown, this is the handicap at the back end of the season, you can see that he's being ridden more prominently. He's only a couple off the pace, and that's exactly where this horse needs to be. He needs to be up there forcing the issue, and we can see as they turn in there, he's only dropped off. He's still at the front. He's on the back end of the front. They're in the home straight now, and you can see he's jumped that one in front. You can see the way that he's putting clear. This is top weight. This is a really serious weight-carrying performance from a really good horse. And let's not forget, he's had 7 races up to this point, so he's not coming in at the freshest. I'm not saying he's over the top, but he's not fresh. jump in the last there, and he's gone clear. And I think this is a really, really assured effort. Like I say, carrying top weight, he's been made the right use of him. He never looks like in any point he's going to get picked up. And yeah, he's a serious, serious horse, and anyone that's involved in him is going to have a lot of fun this season. He's a big stamp of a horse. I have managed to see him in the flesh a few times. I've seen him at Paul Nicholls' yard, and he's a built chaser. He's ready for it. So him after another summer at grass would be great to see. There will always be that little bit with him. I think, like I say, Harry Cobden knows best, but sometimes where I think he might have been able to kick on with him, or he might have been able to place him a little bit higher up in the field, Harry Cobden's got the feel. He's having to change things as they go. So I'm not saying he's going to be not a great chaser, because I think he will be. I think he, at this point, could be a serious Arkle contender. But I just wouldn't want to get carried away with the fact that he's going to go through the season unbeaten or any of that sort of stuff. So expect that he might get beaten, but I think he could be there or thereabouts, and it would be fantastic to see him at Cheltenham. I think it will be a course that will suit him, given he ran Newbury so well. And obviously that Exeter win as well. I quite like that stuff going in there. So the top novice hurdler, Classical Dream, we had seen him in the hurdlers clip. And you know what? For the fact that he was such a beast, I'm going to show him in this one again as well, just in case you haven't caught the first episode, but well worth a look to go back. And if you think Classical Dream would have been going over fences, he would have been winning the Arkle. He's not going there. You look at some of the other horses in and around. That's why I think Getaway Trump's got the big chance. But Classical Dream will pick up his first start for Willie Mullins. And this is where I talked about in the hurdlers video that he's travelled well up until the end, and he's being ridden a bit here, but this is a horse that looks like he's going to come on from the run. He's not 100% fully wound up for this, and why would he be? It's his first start, but it's a really good effort from him. You can see head down wants to go, and he's done everything right at the beginning, and you can only expect that he's going to get better from this, and that's exactly what he did. The race after, this is against Arrowman, so the reason I show you this clip is you can see his head going about a little bit, and he's starting to get a little bit unsettled at the start. That's part of a personality trait of him, I think, and it's nothing in this instance to be too really alarmed about, but it is something to be conscious of when I show you the Supreme clip. So you can see here he's in front, he's travelling. This was only his second start, so again he's entitled to come forward. Arrowman's the one from Willie Mullins' camp in the blue on the left that comes to challenge. He'd had loads of races in France, he'd had quite a few races that season already in Ireland, and when he comes on top of him, it's the difference between Ruby Walsh and Paul Townend. Now the horse is the one that's obviously done it, but he gets headed here. And I do wonder if it was anyone other than Ruby Walsh, would he have got back up? But he does, he battles, he just shows that he's got that will to win. And, that was a really taken performance. And from that point, he is a very, very firm favourite for a Supreme as far as I'm concerned. So we're watching him as they go into post at Cheltenham. He's going to come in after this next horse and watch him go rodeo style with Ruby Walsh. Almost chucks him off. You can see Ruby gets his feet out the irons. And I touched on in the hurdlers video, so I'll say the same thing again. If any other horse had done this before the prelims, we'd have been saying they've thrown away their chance. People were talking about Al Dancer at the start being a bit keen, all those sort of things. Is it going to ruin his chance? And you can see this is the full start. Look at Ruby on Classical Dream. He's literally just holding on for dear life, trying to take a tug to stop him. And he's got absolutely no chance. Head is down. He's expending energy the whole time that he's doing this. And as I say, the previous one wasn't as bad as a sign at the start, so it is a bit of a trait of his. But he's taken that pull. He's done that on the way down to post. He's wired up. He's loving his racing. He's gagging for it. And then the conditions that this race was running, he was at the front, so he wasn't getting splattered with any of the stuff, but he still had to trudge through it. He still had to run in it. And it's, considering what he did at the start, on the way to post, serious, serious performance this is. This is, it's as good a Supreme performance as I've seen in recent years. And I do think there's no reason why he wouldn't be very, very competitive in a champion hurdle. Now, the thing is, the temperamenty thing there where he's putting himself is only a problem if he loses races as far as I'm concerned. If it's costing him a race, then I don't want to see him doing it. If he's doing it and he's going to win, then let him do it. He's a beast. He wants to go and win. And that's the sort of attitude that I like to see within these types of horses. But two real nice types in behind, but that's a serious, serious effort there. The clip here at Punchestown, I'm just showing you that Ruby Walsh joins him on a little bit later. You'll see him, he's fairly well settled here, but you'll see he starts going a little bit with his head again. And then it's just in the early parts of the race when they do let them go. The reason we're showing you the early part of the clip is that you can see his head's low again with Ruby with his arms down. That's the sort of thing that he's going to be doing. He just wants to get on with his racing. Lots of horses have that sort of racing style. Not saying it's a good thing, not saying it's a bad thing. It's just indifferent. It is a trait of his, and it wouldn't be anything to be seriously alarmed about for next season. And he is a novice. He's early in his racing, but you can see they're straight down, head down. That's just a bit of him. we'll see later on in the latter part of this particular clip that he travels a lot better after a period, and then you'll see him towards the end of the race as well. It's just that, it's the keenness that he wants to go racing, and that's what I liked. Felix Degi gave him a lovely lead there. I do think Felix Degi's at his best when he's leading, so you can use him as a full-blown solid yardstick as far as I'm concerned. But Classical Dream's well clear of him here. Jumps the last nicely, and the thing is, it was a really good performance, but you can see Felix Degi probably does close in on him on the last part of the straight. And I just think, think how much of a season Classical Dream has had. I don't mind him doing that, to be honest. And if he is a bit of a quirky horse, if Felix Degi had got near him, I think he would have pulled out a bit more anyway. So it was decent from Classical Dream there. I touched on him in the hurdlers. He is D1 for the champion hurdle this season, I think, now with the ill-fated Espoir de Lan. It just looks a serious weapon, and I'm just so excited. We've got such a really good batch of novice hurdlers this season. It's a nice, good split. We've got plenty staying over hurdles. We've got plenty that are going to go over fences. It's a really, really good period of racing we're in at the moment. I've touched on in the chases how it could be like a golden era, especially the ages they are. You look at these novice hurdlers we've got here. There's so many 5-year-olds in here. We've got a couple of juveniles that are in here. We've got a really, really nice crop of everything at the moment, and I can't wait to see how things are going. So that wraps it up for this one. Thanks for anyone that stayed all the way through to the end of this. Appreciate all your comments, appreciate all your feedback, and I'm going to get on and I'm going to record the novice chases to get that straight out as well. Thanks again, guys. Bye.